Jimmy Graham, 386 catches, 4,752 yards, 51 touchdowns, and now he's the newest member of the Seattle Seahawks. This is the Real on the Field Gulls podcast, and it's March 12th, 2015. Today I'm joined, as usual, by Rolling Stone, Sports on Earth, and Field Goal Zone Kenneth Arthur. And today we got a special guest, the inimitable Will Brinson from CBS Sports, who's going to tell us about what he thinks of the Seahawks trade for Jimmy Graham, as well as their acquisition of Cary Williams. And we'll talk about a lot of other stuff around the NFL in terms of the crazy-ass free agency period. I'm Danny Kelly. What's up, Kenny? How you doing, man?
I'm good. It's been a crazy week, and you sort of feel a letdown because they get so many things happening in a day, and then it doesn't happen, but still a lot of good stuff happening today.
Exactly. And Will, how you doing, man? Thanks for being on the show with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kenny. When you do a power ranking of the places that you work at that mentioned, how do you power rank them?
I can't, choose what.
Field Goals 1, Rolling Stone 2 is probably
whichever one ends up paying me a salary with health benefits one day, that'll come in number one. As of now.
Yeah, Rolling Stone is pretty cool on the resume.
I gotta say that it is cool, but I also sometimes I get a write for the AV Club, and when I filled out a contributor agreement for the Onion, that was sort of a lifelong dream.
Dang.
That would qualify as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I should have mentioned all the. I'll put that back on the docket next time. It makes us look good anyway.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, let's just get right into it. Will, I guess I'll ask you first. What was your first impression of the Jimmy Graham trade, and kind of what was your reaction? Do you think it was a good trade, bad trade, and what does it mean for the Seahawks going forward?
Well, I mean, my initial reaction, I'll get the joke out of the way first, is that the Seahawks got rid of their first-round pick for the third year in a row, which is probably good because they're better at picking in later rounds than they are in the first round.
Yep.
I don't know why. I mean, they really are. I don't know why that is. Like, they have better players acquired in later rounds. I mean, I think giving up Max Unger stinks, but he was due for some money at some point. Giving up the first rounder hurts because you're talking about a guy who's 5 years of control, maybe 6 years if you include the franchise tag if you hit a home run on him. But to get a guy like Jimmy Graham back, who is under contract, is one of 3 or 4 of the best red zone weapons, or maybe 4 or 5 of the best red zone weapons in the NFL. 3 of the most, he, Marshawn, and Dez, as John Schneider pointed out, have the most touchdowns in the NFL since over the last 3 years. Graham is, to me, what the Seahawks have been looking for in terms of a 1A or a number one weapon for Russell Wilson, and he fits the bill better than even a true number one wide receiver would, because he moves the chains. He's excellent in the red zone. He can go. I think that he'll be great in terms of improvising across the field because he's so athletic. I mean, he's a former basketball player, and so he can jump. So like if Russell's in trouble and he's scrambling to his right, he can throw it up, and Jimmy, you're not going to throw it above Jimmy Graham's head. And to bring him in, and I think it elevates the offense to a different level. It does so many more. I mean, this is so different from the Percy Harvin trade, because I think Percy was such a This is much more of a calculated gamble in giving up the first-round pick than trading for Harvin, because you knew Harvin wanted money. You had to work at a deal for him. He's a locker room issue in the past. He's not a true, traditional weapon in terms of the passing game. I thought Percy was going to explode in Seattle. I love the trade, but I think this one to me is it has similar upside for the offense, but also a much higher floor.
Yeah, and I was going to just add to that. I think, a lot of people have said, oh, they're doing the same thing they did with Percy, and in concept, I think they are, in terms of they're trying to get a guy who is like a matchup nightmare, right? And Percy Harvin was that, but they're totally different types of players. And I think, if you look at Jimmy Graham's production over the years, to me, this is I was on board with the Percy Harvin trade too. Like, I was excited about it. I thought it was going to be a great addition to their offense and everything, but to me, this one makes more sense just because, number one, like you said, he's a guy who can bail out Russell Wilson because he can catch anything that's within like 10 feet of him. And I actually went and watched some tape last night and he was catching all these passes on the sideline from Drew Brees when he was under pressure. He can just throw it to the back shoulder and let Jimmy Graham go up and get it. So I think that's a big deal, and I would definitely agree with you on that.
Well, the other thing too is like, sorry, but I mean, it's like the Seahawks offense for so much of last year was predicated on the fact that if things broke down, Russell Wilson would just scramble and pick up a first down. But that's not sustainable. I mean, and I know it worked for all last year, but I mean, you're even as good as Russell is about giving up the extra yard in order to slide or not get hit. I mean, I think in the playoff, was it the Packers game? I feel like it was the Packers game because you probably suffered a concussion. Nobody knows, but I mean, he was taking some big shots in that game, and so even for a guy as smart as he is about getting out of bounds or sliding, you're still going to take some shots, and you still need somebody to change the way that offense works and kind of open it up. I mean, and I think credit to the Seahawks because if you look at the way that they pursued a quarterback in terms of if they weren't afraid, John Schneider's not afraid to strike out. I mean, he trades for Charlie Whitehurst. Signs Tavares Jackson to big money, signs Matt Flynn to relatively big money.
Oh, yeah, forgot about Flynn.
Right, and then the big draft also Wilson. But you think he pursued every angle to get a quarterback, and I think they did the same thing to get a weapon to get a true. I mean, they brought in Sidney Rice, that was pre-Russell Wilson, paid him, that didn't work. They traded for Percy Harvin, and now they're trading for Jimmy Graham. But they've clearly been trying to find a move tight end like this, and finally the Saints were in a desperate position and were willing to pawn him off.
Well, none of those, you mentioned a lot of names, and a lot of them didn't work out when you talk about Zach Miller, Sidney Rice. I mean, Zach Miller did fine, but definitely not lived up to the expectations when he signed his big contract, and Percy Harvin. What exactly, why do you think that, or don't think that Jimmy Graham, is there a chance that this does not work out, that it was a bad deal, that we'll be looking back in it in a year or two and saying that I can't believe that we gave up all that again for another guy that didn't pan out? Because, I mean, and again, the Seahawks should still be successful because they've got a lot of talented players, but is there a chance that Graham doesn't work out? Because there have been, talk about, in the last 23 games, he's gone over 100 yards just one time, which is kind of surprising. But is it possible that they overvalued him a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big concern is that they overvalued Jimmy Graham based on what his value is in the NFL against what his value is in the Seahawks offense. Because I mean, you're running the ball with Marshawn so much, and you're playing tons of defense, and they're not trying to crank it up and throw the ball 800 times a year. With like the way that Drew Brees and Sean Payton were like gunning for records in the 16th week a few years ago, just to spite the Falcons. I mean, it's a totally different offense. I think there's a chance it backfires. I don't think it will. I mean, it's possible that because you look at Graham's stats, he actually averages more yards per game away from the Superdome than he does. It's not like he needs to be on a track to make it work. And then I always think back to those games against the Seahawks when Graham was neutralized, and you're like, people can neutralize him, but it was the Seahawks doing it. I mean, nobody has the safeties to do that. So I think it works out fine. That he can be the guy who fits that role of sprinting up the seam and taking away some pressure from Marshawn running and giving Russell a kind of an outlet option, especially on third down. But yeah, I mean it's totally possible that it doesn't work out, and it's possible that Jimmy Graham isn't happy about it or isn't thrilled about maybe having his being relegated to the second option in an offense because it's such a run heavy offense. But I mean, to me, the personnel fits and the scheme fits.
Speaking of the other side of the ball and the Seahawks defense, what do you think about the fact that they didn't pay Byron Maxwell what he got from Philadelphia? They did sign an Eagles former cornerback with Cary Williams, who didn't quite work out to his expectations in Philly, but now he gets to play for Pete Carroll. He fits the scheme of what Carroll's looking for in an outside corner. Can you give us some thoughts as far as the drop-off or the difference from Maxwell to Williams and how Cary should work out on this defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a world of difference when you go and play with the Seahawks. I mean, one, you've got Richard Sherman on one side. So, I mean, that helps. And I mean, two, you have Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor back there. So if you're a cornerback, and I mean, that's the whole thing. That's the whole reason that. And by the way, so this is going off tangent, but I was talking with somebody about somebody was tweeting. It was like Fantasy Douche. You guys follow Fantasy Douche?
Yeah.
Yeah, when he was tweeting out like old draft draft day, like draft halls or something. It was like the Broncos 2009 or whatever it was. I mean, it was just terrible. It was the one where they took Alfonso Smith, but that was the trade that allowed the Seahawks to get Earl Thomas, right? Because that was the pick where you got Earl Thomas. And I think that really sparked people. I think people underestimate just how much that pick of Earl Thomas sparks what they're able to do on defense, because he changes the way they operate. When you have safeties on the back end like that can cover up mistakes, it makes a world of difference in how your quarterbacks can play. So Cary Williams, for as bad as he was in Philadelphia, and as much as he gets burned, is probably going to look pretty good in the Seattle scheme, because he fits what the Seahawks want, and you're not being asked to not make mistakes. You're being asked. You have a guy back behind you who's gonna erase most of the stuff if you run into some problems. So I just think it's a world of difference in terms of what you're slotting it in. No, I mean, like, would there be a drop off? Sure, there probably will be a drop off. Or can we ridicule it now and say, oh, they wouldn't have got Cary Williams? But, yeah, but I mean, in 6 months, we're probably, or I guess it's longer than that, but in 9 months, we're like, oh, that's what happens when you go to the Seahawks and you're a quarterback, tall ass other quarterback. Pete Carroll's system, they just know how to find guys. And that'll be what happens, because he'll be playing in a scheme in the way that defense is built that's gonna neutralize some of the mistakes. And by the way, the thing about the Graham thing backfiring is, if it did backfire, even if it did backfire, I still think that they have hit Schneider and Pete, John and Pete have hit so many home runs in the later rounds of the draft that not like we should give them a free pass for screwing up the trades, but I think that their roster is still constructed so well that it wouldn't come back to burn them in the same way like the Julio trade for the Falcons did, where they didn't have
right,
because they weren't landing draft picks.
Yeah, and I think the Seahawks still pick like 11 times. They got a draft pick from the Saints from this. And I think they're going to focus really heavily on like the mid round, second, third, fourth round. I think they in the third and fourth and the fifth maybe they pick a whole bunch of times based on some of the comp pick projections. So yeah, I mean, I think, and the other thing that goes with the Jimmy Graham trade that I'm a fan of is that they didn't have to re-sign him to a whole big deal, which is what they did with Percy, and they had to give him like $12 million signing bonus or whatever. And after this season, none of Jimmy Graham's money is guaranteed. So, if it is a colossal failure, they can at least cut bait and, not have to pay for it in the cap going forward.
But the Jets, the Jets bailed. I mean, Idzik bailed him out with the Percy trade, because if he doesn't, if he doesn't take him in the actual trade, the salary cap ramifications are way, way worse. So that was one where they got lucky in terms of not really getting burnt on the back end by that.
Exactly. All right, well, let's just quickly switch gears and talk a little bit about the rest of the NFC West. I don't know, every team in the NFL, I guess, has been pretty active, but it seems like the NFC West.
The Eagles have been very cold.
I don't know, have they even done anything?
I don't even know if Chip Kelly's in the office.
Oh man, we'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to talk about first the Cardinals and kind of get your thoughts on how you think their off season has gone thus far. I'll run down a couple of moves they've made. They got Mike Iupati, the guard from San Francisco. They went out and signed A.Q. Shipley, a center. They've gotten a couple of defensive linemen in Corey Peters and Corey Redding, and they signed Sean Witherspoon to a one-year deal. I think Darnell Dockett, I forgot to put him there. He's another addition to their defensive line.
No,
he's a subtraction from their defensive line. And so yeah, I guess what were your thoughts on kind of what they've done thus far, and do you think they're getting better this offseason?
I think they're easily at this point the second best team in that division. I mean, it's almost not even.
Yeah.
I think there's a gulf between. I think that Arizona is fairly. Assuming Carson Palmer can come back and be healthy. I know that they have to replace Todd Bowles on that side of the defense, but the job that Steve Keim does in identifying talent and Bruce Arians does in coaching up that talent is right there with Pete and John in terms of. I mean, to me, it is one of the best tandems in the NFL. I mean, Iupati, who I definitely called Upati 90 times on the radio this week. I can't help it. This is why I can't say what was the word?
Inimitable.
Inimitable. I ended up saying Anema or something. But Iupati, he's not great in pass protection, but this dude's a mauler in the run game. and all of a sudden you're slotting him next to Bell here, and it makes me wonder. I don't know that. I mean, I'm not. I wonder how much the Cardinals would be interested in Adrian Peterson if he hit the market.
Oh God.
I mean, because if you put him behind that, because they don't really, they have Ellington, who I assume will be back by training camp, but they don't really have a. I mean, Bruce Arians would love to run the ball.
Yeah.
He loves it. He would love to pound the rock and then take shots down the field. And I mean, he'd like to have Marshawn Lynch. So I was wondering if they wouldn't want to erase the Levi Brown mistake of that Adrian Peterson draft class by bringing him back if he hit the market. Weatherspoon. This has one of my favorite gifts of all time. If you ever seen him after he has a sack, it's like 5 years ago, and he starts doing a double-handed spoon motion in the air, and he's like, it's just like he's like eating really fast. It's a pretty great gift. He's a one-year deal, and I think this is the type of guy. This is just a smart signing by a smart team where it was a former first-round pick out of Missouri, a really like dynamic linebacker. You sign him on a one-year deal, and it's a prove-it deal. If he goes out and blows up, you have a great season. And I think he could be a sneaky comeback player of the year candidate. Peters or Redding, you're talking about building up depth on the defensive line because they lost Dockett, they lost Dan Williams, who signed with he signed somewhere.
Where did he sign?
He signed with the 49ers. No.
Was it the Bears?
God,
No.
This is I should probably have a free agency tracker open.
I know.
Oh, the Raiders. He signed with the Raiders. That's right.
The Raiders, all right.
Yeah. So good for the Raiders. You spent some money. But yeah, I mean, I think that they're bringing in some guys that are going to improve the depth of their team. I just think this team is good anyway. I mean, look at what they did last year with freaking Ryan Lindley at quarterback. I mean, they win the division if Carson Palmer stays healthy. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point that they use an early pick on a quarterback if there's a guy there that they like.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Blake Bortles had fallen to him last year, they might have snagged him. Or I was kind of I know that they kind of like Logan Thomas because Bruce Arians is a Virginia Tech guy, which is weird because Logan Thomas was terrific in college. But I think they understand the value of having a young guy, grooming a young guy there. So I wouldn't be surprised.
For sure.
But I think they're easily the second best team in the division right now.
I thought that Antonio Cromartie played really well there last year, and they did lose him to the Jets. So is there any thoughts as far as, the impact of Cromartie and not having him in the division anymore?
Yeah, I mean, they arguably had the best tandem at quarterback, and so now I think it's Powers. Is it Powers and Peterson?
Yeah, Powers and Peterson, and then you could have.
They added Lamar Woodley too. I mean, not that that's.
They added Lamar Woodley as well.
I mean, that's not like a blow your mind away signing, but I mean, he's talking about depth at linebacker. I mean, I think losing Crow hurts. Now, the nice thing is you're playing in a division where if we're being honest, like you don't have to have two great cornerbacks. Where it's like if you play in the NFC North, you're far more concerned about having you'd rather have two great cornerbacks in the NFC North, right? I mean,
right.
Megatron and Tate and Marshall got traded, but and Cobb and Nelson. I mean, I think it's just a different division. So yeah, Cromartie definitely hurts. I mean, that was a smart signing by them to bring him on there and let him kind of blossom. But I wouldn't think we'll see a huge drop off from that secondary. That defense is built pretty stout.
Yeah, it does make that is an interesting point because it's as far as what you would prepare for in any division, it seems like by trading for Jimmy Graham, the Seahawks might have the best offensive weapon in the entire NFC West. If you consider, Larry Fitzgerald is getting old, Vernon Davis wasn't good last year. The 49ers just added Torrey Smith, he's all right, but I wouldn't put him out in the same level as Graham. And then the Rams don't have anyone, so. Would you say that Jimmy Graham is sort of they got him and now it's sort of that's their X factor, that's their change over the top is that nobody else in the division has Jimmy Graham? Would he be the best player in that division?
Yeah, I mean, right? Isn't he? Unless because Larry Fitzgerald's old. Michael Floyd, I mean, he was supposed to come on last year but didn't. I don't think he blew up the way that people thought he might to take over that number one spot. Jimmy Graham's the best offensive weapon in the division. So that sucks for everybody else.
And going with that, coincidentally, Patrick Willis announces his retirement, so the 49ers lose. I saw this tweet. I think it was Danny Tucito. he said, on the day the Seahawks acquired Jimmy Graham, the Niners, they're the best coverage inside linebacker in the world retires in Patrick Willis, and so that's kind of a good segue into sort of what you think will happen with the 49ers this year. I think, they've lost some key players. They lost Gore. Justin Smith is still sort of undecided, but he might retire. It looks like Crabtree won't be back. Willis isn't back. I don't know when Bowman will be back. They might lose Cox and Culver, their cornerbacks. So I guess what was your thought? The way I framed it, are they as much of a flaming dumpster as a lot of people have said they are, or do you sort of think that people are underestimating what they can still do?
I think that we are. I think our flaming dumpster factor, or the flames are too high. We're reading. I think the flame, and I mean, like, I'm one of the people who's been like bashing their offseason. It's been a terrible offseason for them. I think they are definitely in trouble, but we are probably freaking out a little too much. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like they're not going to win 5 games, are they?
I would agree. I think people are probably freaking out a little bit too much.
I mean, so the quarterback's coach, Steve Logan, who is actually he worked in Raleigh. I live in Raleigh. He worked in Raleigh with the TV station or the radio station. He was doing media, and he's a big Colin Kaepernick guy. And he worked with Tom Sula over at the Ryan Fire or whatever. And that's how Tom Sula was like, hey man, I want you to come out here. Logan, I wouldn't underestimate the type of job that he can do, because he turned David Garrard out of ECU into a starting caliber NFL quarterback for a decade.
Yeah.
Groomed Matt Ryan out of Boston College into franchise quarterback, and is a smart offensive mind, high energy guy. So just to be honest, like sort of Harbaugh-esque, not quite as crazy. But I mean, like I think it's interesting to watch out. I think Colin Kaepernick will have a better year than most people expect because of the Steve Logan influence. The big concern is that is Torrey Smith a number one, or is he just kind of a burner? Because
right.
I don't see Torrey Smith lighting up the Seahawks secondary. Or I could see Patrick Peterson shutting down Torrey Smith too. So in division, I don't know if Torrey Smith is worth it. Was it 45 years, $40 million, which is a ton of money. I'd rather just trade for Brandon Marshall. And the biggest problem for me with the 49ers is that you've given away your offensive and defensive identity guys. It's not given away, but Patrick Willis and Justin Smith, if they retire, that's who you stop the run with. And then
right.
Frank Gore and Iobati, that's who you run with. And all of a sudden, this 49ers team went from this 3-time NFC Championship game physical beast on both sides of the ball and moved to this team that's kind of in transition, and we don't know what they're going to be. And where's their secondary? Do
they even have any starters right now in their secondary, or in cornerbacks anyway?
Yeah, because Eric Reed's a good player.
Right.
Yeah,
and Jimmy Ward might be good next year. Who knows?
Yeah, but he's still like a nickel corner or a safety. So I just think there's so much transition on that roster. Then they've still Jed York's out here beating this. We're gonna sign really good guys, Drum, and then within the next week they sign Jerome Simpson and another guy gets arrested. Look, who's pulling the levers here? It just feels so dysfunctional. But then whenever something is so obvious in the NFL, it's almost too obvious. Like everybody's gonna pick them to be the editors are always like, all right, who's your who's your team that falls apart next year?
Right.
Everybody is going to pick the 49ers.
Well, this some of the not so obvious, and help us understand a little bit what exactly are we going to expect from Nick Foles on the Rams that's going to be different than, say, what they would have gotten out of Sam Bradford?
I don't know. I mean, I think that Sam Bradford's better than Nick Foles.
Right.
I guess I understand why the Rams would do this from a salary cap perspective and from a let's move on so people will stop annoying us about Sam Bradford.
Yeah.
But I don't see how Nick Foles. I mean, Nick Foles he doesn't have 2 ACL tears, but he's just as injury prone. I mean, he has a collarbone. Even worse, he suffers different injuries. Like at least it's just Sam Bradford's knees flukily being blown out. I mean, Foles gets hurt all the time. He displayed better downfield accuracy with the Eagles at times, but then you can point to a lot of those as like like a couple times, seriously, balls got tipped, and Deshaun Jackson would end up catch him and running the end zone. He's playing in a Chip Kelly system, which is designed to get people open. I don't know if the Rams offer that. I think the Rams are gonna. I don't know. I don't think that Nick Foles is gonna make them appreciably better. I think they're very much in the Marcus Mariota sweepstakes now that they've gotten rid of Bradford. And
Whoa!
Don't you think so?
Yeah, that would be crazy.
I mean, if you're at 10, you've traded with the Redskins how many times?
Right.
And the Redskins aren't interested in taking Mariota. I know John Clayton reported that they would take him at 5. Call it the Redskins and swap for. Okay, I feel like I know this not for a fact, but if you're the Rams at 10, you can call Dave Caldwell and say, "We'll give you." I mean, what do you have to give?
I would just wish that I lived in a world where the Rams ended up using Nick Foles to trade for Marcus Mariota.
That would be amazing. And then Chip Kelly's just crying.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, you take the 2016 second rounder that Chip Kelly sent you, and you use that to move from 10 to. I mean, does that get you from 10 to 3? Probably not. Probably got to throw something else in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you can get from 10 to 3 or 10 to 5, leapfrog the Jets. Maybe the Jets. I don't even know that the Jets are going after Mariota. I legitimately feel like they might roll the dice with Geno Smith and Ryan Fitzpatrick this year. One
more thing that I really want to make sure I get your thoughts on, because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. It seems like a lot of people don't. I don't know. I think organizations don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it to the writers. They don't want to talk about it to anyone else. But there is an elite defensive end that is a free agent that can sign with anyone, and we're not hearing about it. So, I don't know, maybe people are waiting for Greg Hardy as far as the suspension and what's going to happen in the future, but do you have any idea or hearing anything as far as where Greg Hardy might go? And if he does, is he going to get a multi-year contract? Is it going to be a time for him to reset his reputation? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, it's a great question, because Hardy's a stud on the field. I mean, the dude is a beast. He's 26. He's young. I think he average 10.5 sacks for 3 years or something. I mean, he is a game-changing pass rusher. But you have to. I think that the problem with Greg Hardy is there might almost be a worse stigma for a team that signs Greg Hardy than if a team signs Ray Rice. And I don't mean I think you can get past anything if you're talented in the NFL, and a team can get past it eventually. But I think I've been saying for a while, I think he'll get suspended next year. And I think Jason Cole of Bleacher Report reported that there's they're bracing for a 1 to 2 game suspension. And I bet the teams want to know, because you don't want to pay this guy X number of guaranteed dollars and you lose him for 2 games to suspension, and then it's up in the air if he's appealing. So with Hardy, a couple things come to mind. One, a team like the Bengals would be willing to take a chance on him. But at the same time, again, I think they want to wait to see what the deal with the suspension is. And don't forget that this was about a year ago. Today, actually, I think it's right at a year ago. The Panthers put the franchise tag on Greg Hardy, and then 2 months later, he's getting in this altercation with his at the time girlfriend. There's a lot of things that play into that, and I mean, it's been dismissed, but there's a whole bunch of stuff involving the legal system and their weird relationship that is would be worth a whole other podcast probably, that we don't really know the facts of. But I think there is so much concern that if you sign Greg Hardy now, and you're the team that signs him before he gets suspended, before that suspension is announced, then you will be. It's not NFL pass rushing star suspended for domestic violence incident from last offseason. It's Bengals defensive end Greg Hardy suspended. So you know what I'm saying? The PR hit for signing him before the suspension takes place is a major factor, and I think that has to matter to teams. Ultimately he's going to get a multi-year deal because he's young. I mean, if I was a GM and I could do this anonymously and not get in trouble for it and not take the PR hit, I mean, I'd give him a 3-year deal and sign him as a pass rusher, especially like a 4-3 where he just puts his hand on the ground and go. You set him up next to somebody like they did with Charles Johnson. He went wild.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see, and sort of the same deal with Adrian Peterson and the Ray Rice situations and all that. Well, thanks so much for coming on with us. It's been a little over a half an hour, so we'll let you go. And I know
Sorry if I talked too far at length.
No, no. I was just noticing on Twitter the whole tweet gate or whatever you want to call it. It's still kind of going down.
Yeah, I haven't been checking my mentions, but
we gotta let you get back to that.
yeah. All right, guys. So hey, listen, this is a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Actually, I have to go record our. Can I plug this? I have to go record our Eye on Football podcast at CBSSports.com with Ryan Wilson, which you can find on iTunes and subscribe.
Definitely.
Eye on Football.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Cool, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right. So, Kenny, I guess where do you want to take it from there? Did you have any reactions to some of the things that Will had to say?
I think that as far as the NFC West goes, I still think it's pretty obvious that the Seahawks are on top, and then I'm not so sure about the Cardinals. I do think that the 49ers are at the bottom, and I don't really have any quandaries with saying that I do think that they could win 5 or 6 games. But there's just because there's a lot of uncertainty there when you have a new head coach and new coordinators. Like,
for sure.
Maybe they suck, maybe they're not any good. So I do think that the 49ers are in 4th, and then I think that the Rams, I still think that when you have Robert Quinn and when you have some of the players on defense that they have, they're going to cause more problems for the Seahawks than I think that the Cardinals or the 49ers are going to cause.
I'm just always afraid to write off the 49ers because every single time I feel like I've done that over the last couple of years, they just come back stronger. And so I'm trying to play the opposite game or whatever, the reverse psychology game, and I'm going to say they're going to still be really good and intimidating and all that. But like you said, it's weird. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Jim Tomsula if he's in way over his head. Based on some of his initial sort of interactions with the media and everything, it was like, whoa, this guy might be in over his head. And obviously that's just interacting with the media, and who really gives a crap about that. But that was just sort of the, I guess, vibe that he gave off, that he felt like a little bit in over his head. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with those guys.
Well, look, how many of the bad memories I have of the Seahawks playing the 49ers, how many times have it involved Frank Gore? How many times has it involved Patrick Willis? Like, to not have those two guys, and then in addition to that, not have Justin Smith likely, I just don't see how they can be as good. Bowman is a good player. Aldon Smith is a good player, but a lot of teams have a few good players. You really got to have. I don't know how they're going to have a running back game. They have shown absolutely. Balky has shown no ability to draft a running back. So I don't really. And they took all of these risks with using second, third round picks on guys that they knew were going to spend the first year on the injured reserve, and now it's like, a lot of those guys didn't end up coming back. It's like, I think it's all coming back to bite them now. And as far as if they have to replace both their starting corners, there's probably something that they can survive. It's not like having to replace Sherman, but I just don't see them being very good, just based on the fact of they didn't play that good without Patrick Willis last year. They went 4-6 in the games that he didn't make. So
yeah.
I do think that the 49ers are in last, but then again, the Rams always find a way to surprise you. They could go 1-15 next year because they're the Rams.
All right, well, let's sort of change focus to finish this up for the last 20 minutes or so, and I wanted to get your reaction to some of the things that are outside the NFC West. Did you have, obviously the big thing has been the Eagles, and as we're recording right now, it's being reported on Twitter that Ryan Matthews and DeMarco Murray have signed in Philly. So Philadelphia's run game is now incredibly expensive and incredibly, on paper, very good. Mm-hmm. I kind of am sick of talking about the Eagles, but what's been your impression of what Chip Kelly's been doing?
Well, I know at first it seemed like a lot of people were met with confusion, especially with the Bradford deal, and
right.
I know that as you wrote earlier this week about sort of those in-house arguments that they had with Tom Gamble and
mm-hmm.
now that Kelly's got full control of the team, does he know what he's doing? And I wrote for Sports Unearthed this week. It went up, I think, this morning or something like that. But to me, it seems like Chip Kelly feels like no matter what he's got on offense, he's going to be okay, which I think he's got a proven track record of doing. His first year with the Eagles, they lost Jeremy Maclin, and they lost, and then they went without. Michael Vick got injured, which meant that they had to switch after like 6 games. They switched to Nick Foles, who wasn't that good to begin with in his first year. And then Nick Foles, obviously, he posted a passer rating of 119 or whatever.
Yeah.
So they go in the next year thinking, okay, well, Nick Foles is my quarterback, and and then what do? They lose they cut their number 1 receiver, Deshaun Jackson, and they go to Jeremy Maclin, who, up until, a lot of people don't, even seem to recall that Jeremy Maclin was a free agent last year, but he came out and he had that torn ACL, and then he comes and he signed a 1-year deal with the Eagles to prove it, and then he proved it.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So he works on the fly a lot, Chip Kelly, with his offense, and then obviously Nick Foles got hurt, wasn't that great, and still in each of the last 2 years the Eagles went 10-6. They finished 4th and 3rd in scoring. So I really think that when you look at the offense, especially now, obviously you don't have to concern yourself with the loss of Foles. They're going with maybe Sam Bradford, but then they add Murray and Matthews, and they did lose Maclin, but like I said, I think that they have some sort of plan with wide receiver. But, and I'm finally getting to the point here, the defense. They had Byron Maxwell.
Yeah.
They had Kiko Alonso. They signed Connor Barwin 2 years ago. That's another move that the Eagles made that was underrated. He had 14.5 sacks last year. So I think their defense, while their offense is something that Kelly can figure out, the defense hasn't been very good. So I think that they improved their defense. I still think their offense is all right. And I do think that the Eagles are more of a threat today than they were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I would agree with you totally. I think to the point that you made in terms of the juggling that Kelly has done with some of the guys, some of the personnel, I think he really does just trust his system. And it's sort of similar to what Pete Carroll does with his defense in a way. Carroll is very much like plug a guy in, next man up, and have him do something very specific and be good at that specific thing and make it work in the system. I think that in some respects that Chip Kelly feels the same way about his offense, and that's why he's sort of traded away and got rid of all the guys that he doesn't really like or for whatever reason. Because after letting Shady McCoy go, originally it was like, oh, they're just saving cap money. They get rid of his $10 million cap, and then they signed DeMarco Murray for 20-something million guaranteed, and now they're signing Ryan Matthews. So it obviously was not a money issue. Now maybe it was a fit thing, like maybe because there had been words out of Philly that Kelly didn't really like how much Shady liked to bounce the ball outside. He's more of a north-south type of running back system. So, well, I mean, they do a lot of wide zone as well, but I think he was maybe a little bit like he didn't want him to be bouncing the ball quite so much. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I don't know how much they run it out of shotgun, but I thought it was interesting that ESPN Stats and Info, before they tweeted out Will Brinson's tweet, but they tweeted out that the top 2 yards per carry out of the shotgun last year was Ryan Matthews and DeMarco Murray. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think they're all shotgun pretty much.
Yeah, so they're looking for a very specific type of running back. The thing about money, I don't think that the cap stuff, it's great when you're Davis Sue and you can understand it, but I don't think that the cap stuff should be put out in the public where they just all of a sudden start making all these, like they're like, oh, that's a bad move, or oh, that's a good move. Like that stuff isn't for you to worry about.
There's so much nuance in cap, right. And like it's always changing because you
gotta trust that the teams obviously know how much money that they have and what they're gonna spend and whatnot. But obviously, like when you look at the Saints, they fucked up. Like the Saints they didn't do a good job with their future cap, but they also knew that. I think when they were going at it, that they were like, well, we're trying to win a Super Bowl now, and if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. But I think that when they got rid of Shady's money or whatever, like you still they it's not a lot of benefit to not spending money. So they're going to use up all the cap, just like the Seahawks use up as much as the cap as they can get the talent for, But yeah, kind of just to pivot here as far as spending money and using cap. The Jaguars had a lot of cap. We got a former Seahawk over there, Gus Bradley, and they have not done so well, but kind of interesting to see how they're going to be next year. They've added Julius Thomas, Jared Odrick. They just added Devon House. I don't know if it's Davon or something, but
I think Devon. I'm not sure actually.
I would go with Devon, but
sure, yeah, that works.
Sergio Brown, Jeremy Parnell, and Dan Skuda.
Oh yeah, Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Because it is spelled Jermey.
Yeah, it's like Jeremy. That's like
Jeremy.
Jonathan Banks.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe these guys coming up with this stuff. Well, I guess they're not coming up with it, but they also, it seems like, I haven't heard anything that says that they're not going to welcome back Justin Blackmon.
Yeah, I think they're still hoping he can come back. I don't know what his situation is right now, to be honest. I don't know what his...
As far as I know, Josh Gordon seems to pop up every couple weeks with a new DUI charge, but, Blackmon...
He's stayed out of trouble?
I think so. And then they also picked third overall. Is it possible that what do you think about the Jaguars? Do you think that they could be a wild card team?
I mean, I don't know about wild card in terms of getting into the playoffs, but I do think that they are going to be a lot better this year than they have been the last 2 years. The last 2 years they've been kind of disappointing, I think, obviously, but yeah, they're going to have to put together a good draft. They're going to have early picks in every round, so that's going to help them a lot. But like when you just look at their roster, look at them on paper, they're a pretty interesting team, honestly. Now they have Julius Thomas, and they're going to pair him with Mercedes Lewis, so they have two really good tight ends to kind of try and take some pressure off of Blake Bortles. I think getting Marquise Lee and Allen Robinson back into their second season, that's going to help a lot. Allen Hurns was a big surprise last year. He's kind of flown under the radar a little bit. And then, like you said, if Blackman's back, then he's another first-round pick that they can sort of give. It's sort of the same thing that Pete Carroll had tried to do from the start, is like put as many weapons around a quarterback as you can and take the pressure off of them. In Seattle's case, it's been the run game. But I think in Jacksonville, it's going to be, they're continuing to give Blake Bortles as many weapons as they can, and I think it's his sort of chance to sink or swim. He obviously didn't play as well as a lot of people were hoping last year, but
I mean, he played terribly. I mean, it's just
I was putting it mild.
No, yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's like people can say like, oh yeah, well, rookies don't play that well, and it's like, yeah, but he wasn't the first rookie to ever play. Like there were he was bad. You go down and it's like Jimmy Clausen and like Blake Bortles. I mean, the two of the worst to ever come out there and throw the ball around. And that it is fair to say that he didn't have a lot of help. Luke Jokel isn't doing very good as far as anyone can tell, and they don't really have a lot of. I think that they got some surprises with Hurns and they got some interesting weapons. But yeah, I think he would have done a lot better with someone like Blackmon, and I definitely think that he's going to do a lot better with Julius Thomas. And I can actually say that if and when the Jaguars play the Browns next year, that's a game I want to watch.
Yeah. I mean, and like there's for more reasons than just that Gus Bradley is down there now. I think it's an interesting team to watch, and they have a new offensive coordinator this year, so hopefully that will help out with Bortles in terms of getting him easier, whatever. I don't know what his problem was, because to be honest with you, I didn't watch many Jaguars games. I was more focused on, towards the end of the season, some of the playoff teams, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what goes on with that, and if they can get over that hump, or if we're gonna have to start talking about Gus Bradley getting fired at some point. But so going forward, I mean, what other teams kind of stood out to you, and I'd also like to get your sort of just on the off the cuff sort of reaction to what the Seahawks did. So first off, any other teams kind of catch your eye in free agency so far?
I think you got to. I think it's interesting to sort of consider where the Patriots are at. As far as after losing Revis and deciding not to keep Browner. I think the team that just won the Super Bowl, it's worth asking. And also releasing Vince Wilfork, like it's worth asking: are they better or are they worse? I mean, they got to be worse on defense somewhat if you're going to lose one of the best defensive players in the NFL.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah, so
he was kind of the linchpin of their defense in a lot of ways, because then they could, the coverage sort of went off of Revis. He was always, on Revis Island, so.
Right.
It'd be interesting.
I mean, the cornerbacks on the roster now, even if I named them, a lot of them, other than, like Malcolm Butler, what's he going to grow into? You can't just say after one play that, that's some answer for the future. So they got Kyle Arrington and Alfonso Denard, Justin Green, Logan Ryan. There's not a whole lot in terms of any assurance. So, that's going to be interesting. But then on the other side of the coin, are the Jets going to be a playoff team? Are they going to be that much better now that they've got Revis and Cromartie and Brandon Marshall? And I kind of like Geno Smith personally. I think that he's obviously another guy that had his struggles, but about half the time I think he plays really well. So I think that the Jets are going to be an interesting team. What do you think?
Yeah, that was actually the team I was going to bring up. When, talking about some teams I think that have done really good things in free agency. They got James Carpenter. That's not exactly a big-time signing, but he's an experienced guy. He'll give you – I think they were definitely looking for some help on the offensive line, so that's got to help them. Obviously getting Brandon Marshall to pair with Eric Decker. They've got a couple some interesting players, that last year didn't get to play a lot, Shaq Evans and Quincy Enunwa. Those will be interesting receivers to watch this year. And they got T.J. Graham now, who I think was with Chan Gailey, or maybe he wasn't, but switching to sort of a spread offense is going to be definitely really interesting to watch for them. And like you said, having Geno Smith go back to doing some of the stuff that he was more comfortable with in college will be interesting. And obviously on defense, the Jets have like one of the best front lines in the NFL, if not the best, with Wilkerson, Harrison, Sheldon Richardson, and Quentin Coples, and they've got some good outside linebackers. They had to really spend a lot on David Harris to keep him around, but maybe that pays off for them just in the short term. And then obviously, the stuff they've done at corner is crazy, and I just think Bowles knows what he's doing, and they could be kind of like the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, obviously it's an easy connection, but they could be like the Arizona Cardinals of last year, where they don't really win on their quarterback. They win on like crazy good defense and a running game, and sort of just not asking their quarterback to do too much.
Yeah, it's weird that like the 13th overall pick 2 years ago is like the number 4 cornerback on that team right now, D. Milliner. It's kind of
right.
I don't know what I assume that there's some sort of that they'll trade him or something, because they also signed Buster Skrine, so they've signed Revis, Cromartie, and Skrine, and
that's crazy. And they have Calvin Pryor from last year, who didn't really play that well, but maybe Bowles can sort of help him figure out what's going on. And Jaquan Jarrett is a good player, decent player. Maybe they have D. Milliner play something like sort of like some sort of slot nickelback or something like that, and get some good use out of him that way. Because how Bowles sort of ran a crazy defense that had guys coming from everywhere and blitzing from all different angles. And they've not overnight, but over the last 2 weeks have become one of the most interesting teams in the NFL. And I normally wouldn't pay any attention to the Jets. I don't think I watched one of their games last year, other than to check in to see how Percy was doing. But that's definitely one of those teams I'm looking forward to watching.
Yeah, I think it's a legit defense, and again, every team is going to have that same problem with, if you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to get super far. But they also traded for Ryan Fitzpatrick, which I don't think is going to change much. But
it's insurance anyway.
Right, that's the thing. Just like the Seahawks is, they got, if you want to call it luck, they got lucky, and in their third year they managed to find a franchise quarterback. They never took a whole lot of like major home run swings at quarterback. They just took a bunch of, just regular drive him over to second base, kind of single shots, and then he got one. And that's what's going to happen with the Jet. It's the same thing with the Bills. Is the Bills are supposed to have a great defense, and but again, they're still taking shots at Matt Castle and stuff like that. So, anybody in there, nobody's going to top the Patriots until Tom Brady retires, unless one of these other guys all of a sudden, I think Tannehill is fine, but not enough to overcome Brady, even with Sue in there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of. It's funny because it seems like we've been talking about the AFC a lot, but the Colts are an interesting team as well that have, on paper, gotten a little bit better this year, signing Frank Gore and Andre Johnson and a couple of defensive players to help with their pass rush, and they were a good team. I think, did they make it to the AFC Championship game?
They did.
Yeah, so they're a team that they're not that far off, and last year they had a lot of injuries. And this year they had Kendall Langford, who's a more of a run stuffer type, but then they also had a Trent Cole, who's experienced and effective pass rusher.
I wish they had made it farther than the AFC Championship game.
God, yeah.
Because I don't think that. I think it's interesting that I don't want to take pot shots at anyone personally. I just don't think that Ryan Grigson is a very good general manager. I mean, I think that he makes a lot of the moves that like a fan would make, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna get Frank Gore and Andre Johnson, and I'm gonna get Quill Jackson, and it's like.
Well, he won GM of the year for selecting Andrew Luck. It's like, no shit.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Like you're the like top-rated quarterback in the last 25 years. You took him with the #1 pick. Like, give him the trophy.
Yeah, exactly. And then all the other picks, like Bjorn Werner, he was like healthy scratches last year.
Trent Richardson. Yeah.
Trent Richardson, awful move. A lot of these things, I don't really fear, because I just feel like the Colts are going to have a soft roster without like that elite, scary defensive player that is going to really scare you. Like, they have Andrew Luck, and he's a great player. He's a great young player who could definitely develop into that Peyton Manning-esque player that can carry you to a Super Bowl every 5 years or something like that. But as far as the overall roster, like as long as you've got, that's the thing though. When these teams stay good for a long time, you can't have a guy that's good at picking first overall. You got to have a GM that's good at picking in the late 20s every single year, and that's not something that the Colts were especially good at during the Peyton Manning years. So, it's got to be able to hit in those middle rounds. You got to be able to hit in the late 20s. The Patriots, they were hit and miss, but sometimes they did hit in those late picks with like Logan Mankins and stuff. So. That's really going to be.
If you look at the Patriots' last 10 first-round picks, they're all hits, honestly. A lot of them, anyway.
Right, and when you're talking about the Colts, I'm just not seeing those same kind of hits. He did make a good trade for Vontae Davis. I'll give him that.
Yeah, for sure.
But overall, I'm not especially. I mean, if you would come back with, I know that Reggie Wayne is a little bit older than Andre Johnson, and to me, it's the difference between Andre Johnson and Reggie Wayne at this stage in their careers might be not as large enough to make a huge difference.
That'll be an interesting one to see, because Andre Johnson's played with bad quarterbacks lately, and
I would definitely. I think that I would have welcomed him to come play for the Seahawks, and I think he's a good player, and I think that it's possible that he's got a resurgence in him where he catches 100 balls next year. Don't get me wrong, but as far as getting him over the hump, I didn't really see throwing for a ton of yards as their problem last year. They already were able to do that. I see the problem being that they're pretty average on defense and can outrun the ball.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. Well, so do you want to? What was your initial reaction when we heard about Jimmy Graham?
It's just excitement.
Yeah.
I even knowing that it was Unger going the other way in a first-round pick, like I had been thinking that they were going to trade. I guess it was already sort of said outright that they were shopping the first-round pick, but I had been thinking that they were probably just going to trade it, because I didn't see where they were going to find sort of the same sort of value in the draft as they would trading it. So I was thinking that could be another Percy Harvin situation, and then I would have never imagined that it was Jimmy Graham. But yeah, I was excited, and I am excited. And people that talk about, Max Unger, like, I think Unger is a good guy, a good veteran locker room guy, and a great center. But at the same time, centers can only do so much. And when you look at the centers that the Seahawks played in the playoffs last year, the Patriots had a rookie that was drafted, I think, in the 4th round, and the Packers had a rookie that was drafted in the 5th round.
Yep.
And,
yep.
The Seahawks are talking to Stefan Wisniewski. I don't know if that news will...
Yeah, I have no idea how you used to say that, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm going with that.
That works.
Wisniewski. And, yeah, I think that they'll be fine. I don't think that the center is going to be a problem, especially since they played 10 games without Unger last year and made the Super Bowl. So the thing is, when you talk about the games that Unger missed and the games that he was in and the offensive difference, you leave out the fact that Jimmy Graham was not on those teams either. So when you're talking about adding a guy like Graham, to me it changes the dynamic of the whole offense.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of my reaction too. I think I was really excited about the acquisition. I think, obviously you have flashbacks to the way you felt when Percy Harvin was acquired, but because it was a similar situation, you're giving up a first-round pick, paying a guy a lot of money, but at the same time, I was high on Percy Harvin as a player. I think he still is a good player, but I think Jimmy Graham is in a different stratosphere in terms of the ability to be a mismatch. And I went through and watched all his catches from last night, and consistently Drew Brees is just throwing it up high for him. He's just going up and catching it like over guys that he has a 6-inch like height difference over. And I mean, you might have some guys can match up better than others. Like, if you put a Brandon Browner on him, for instance, you might struggle. Or if you put a KJ Wright and or Cam Chancellor on him, maybe he struggles. But against the vast majority of NFL defenders, and most of the guys that they're going to put you on, like, they're going to be 6'1" maybe, and 200 pounds, and he's 6'7", 270 or whatever. And so I think and that suits Russell Wilson's skill set too, because as we saw in the Super Bowl, like if you can just throw the ball up for a guy, and you have a guy with really great like body control and really great timing and an ability to box out, which Jimmy Graham has all of those. I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be really good. I mean, like, just imagine like what he did just imagine what Russell Wilson did with Golden Tate, and then make Golden Tate 8 inches taller. It's kind of a similar thing, because it was Golden Tate wasn't like beating guys downfield or anything. He was catching a lot of passes on the sideline, or as a back shoulder play, or kind of like over the top of something, like when you run like a wheel route or whatever. And obviously, a lot of Golden Tate's like production was after the catch, and that's obviously different than what you're going to get with Graham. But in terms of the jump ball situation, I think just imagine Golden Tate with 8 inches.
What, you want to repeat that?
8 inches taller.
But yeah, here's I think the biggest difference is that between Percy Harvin and Jimmy Graham is that Percy Harvin is more of a guy that you give the ball and hope he creates something, and I think that Jimmy Graham is a guy that is creating things before he gets the ball, without getting the ball. Like, he's such a Harvin is someone that you almost hope that the defense doesn't account for, and Graham is someone that the defense will account for in every play. Like, the fact that some people would say disappeared in some games, to me, when you look at the bigger picture, you would say he didn't disappear. He just, he drawed so much attention that it was hard to go to him because he had 2 defenders on him. Like, there was a game against the Steelers last year where he had no targets, no targets, no catches. And obviously that pissed off fantasy owners. But from a bigger perspective, Drew Brees had 5 touchdowns, no interceptions that day, and he was throwing it to I think a different receiver might have caught every touchdown. But to me, when you watch the tape, I read a little bit on it, and it was a lot of the Steelers were playing a zone, so there was only so much that he could maybe affect. But a lot of those plays where big things happened, there were guys around Jimmy Graham and guys around other players. So to me, it's like when the Seahawks have someone like Jimmy Graham, that's going to make the job easier for, and I don't even want to, because I don't want to say Doug Baldwin, because I'm talking more about someone on like the outside, I guess Jermaine Kearse, but we really need to get some receivers still, is the point there. But whoever the receivers are, I see it being their jobs being a lot easier just based on Jimmy Graham. So, But at the same time, I think those plays inside the red zone are going to change immensely, because the Seahawks are really not necessarily looking for high volume guys. They're not necessarily looking for 120 target guys, but they are looking for guys that can make that one play.
Yeah. When I think about Jimmy Graham, I think Percy Harvin was really good in theory. Like, when you think about like the stuff he could have done with the read option, the stuff he could have done with bubble screens, and the matchup nightmares that you had to figure out what you're going to put on him, like a linebacker or a corner, blah blah blah. A lot of that was sort of in theory, because he hadn't really done it a ton. Like, he had a good year statistically before he hurt his ankle the year before the Seahawks got him. But like, if you look at Jimmy Graham, like, his numbers have been really consistent, and not just from a catches standpoint, but from touchdowns, which I think is the huge thing. And if you go and look at his touchdowns, it's not like to me it's not like Russell Wilson can't make these throws. Like, Jimmy Graham's not going to have the volume that he had with the Saints. He's not going to have 85 catches and like 1,300 yards with the Seahawks. And that's just because of the Seahawks. One, Russell Wilson's not Drew Brees. Two, it's the Seahawks don't have that kind of volume. But when you look at some of the throws that Drew Brees was making to Jimmy Graham in the end zone, these are throws Wilson makes to other guys. These are throws he can make. And the perfect example would be like the throw right before halftime in the Super Bowl that he made to Chris Matthews, which was just a back corner fade. I mean, that is Jimmy Graham's bread and butter. Like, just throw it up for him, he'll go get it. And I think Russell Wilson, he can do that. I think he that's kind of his, that's in his wheelhouse, and I think he's going to be good at that. And I think they're going to have. I mean, just right now, I think they're going to have a good connection.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't be surprised Graham hitting 12, 13 touchdowns, only based on the fact that it's not a matter of how obvious it is. You just can't stop it. It's coming, and I think that I know this goes against the grain, but I think Darrell Bevell's pretty good at drawing up those plays that are clever and kind of unstoppable when you have the right personnel.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the Seahawks aren't getting to the Super Bowl 2 years in a row without some ingenuity on offense, and I think they definitely have that. I think Graham just adds another dimension because he's such a huge weapon in the red zone. I think that's the main area that I'm really looking forward to seeing is the red zone and the third downs. I think those are two areas that you're going to get a lot better in.
Yeah, I mean, forget everything else and just think about this, because I know that there's 11 players on offense, and maybe the offensive line is a little disjointed right now, and maybe the wide receivers are lacking, but the Seahawks have a top 3 tight end, a top 3 running back, and a top 6 quarterback. Like, that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think you could really say the same about Percy. I think Percy was more like a weapon. He wasn't like a top 5 guy.
No, I wouldn't say he's a top 5 wide receiver.
Not even like a top 10 probably.
Probably not.
He like in theory he was such an amazing weapon, but it was just like figuring out how to use him. I think to me Jimmy Graham is a lot more. He's more tangible as a threat. Like he's gonna get his targets in the red zone and he's gonna convert them. So to me, I'm excited about that. And hey, going back to Ryan Grigson, guess who just got? As we're talking right now, guess who just got released?
Andrew Luck.
Well, that would be interesting, but no.
No, I don't know.
Trent Richardson.
Oh, perfect. That makes sense.
Anyway, I think that does it for today. We did a good solid hour and 15 or so.
Yeah, we'll make the audience like Trent Richardson and let him go.
Exactly. And so we'll be back next Thursday, and thanks for tuning in. And Kenny, do your little outro thing. I know you're much better at this than I am.
Oh, the outro?
Yeah.
All right, well, now I feel like I'm going to go into like radio voice or something like that.
Do it.
Official. Thank you for... No, I can't do that. Yeah, this has been Real in the Field Gulls podcast. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, the podcast app. Just go to the Field Gulls podcast. It'll be up on YouTube and on Blog Talk Radio, and we're here every single Thursday. And we'll be back next week with another guest. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Kenny.
All right, and we'll see you next week, or hear you next week, or you'll hear us. Bye.